Well, hello, and welcome to another Discover Headless Tech interview from headlesscreator.com. I'm Marcelo Lewin, the Headless Creator. As always, you can get a hold of me right there, Marcelo at headlesscreator.com. Today's episode is actually going to be really cool. We're going to talk about finding the balance between monolith and composable architectures. We're going to start with pros and cons of each. Then we're going to talk about the reality of life, which is we have to find a balance between both of them because most enterprises have a mixture of both of them. My special guest is Claes Justesen. He's the Digital Marketing and Commerce Director at Deloitte. But before we get started, you know how this works. I have to tell you about headlesscreator.com. Well, I don't have to tell you. I want to tell you about headlesscreator.com. Go get your free account. You'll have access to the podcast, all the episodes we have, and we have lots of them. But you're going to also have access to the entire course, which gives you pretty much everything you see here. We got tutorials, interviews, bonus material. Then you're going to have access to the entire actual site, which gives you access to every course we have. And we have lots of them. Content Modeling Weekly, the retrospective, that's a really cool one we have. Actually, they're all really cool. Beginner's Guide to DXC, weekly tip courses, lots of headless CMS courses and boot camps. And we keep adding stuff. So it doesn't cost you anything. Get your free account. All our stuff is educational. We don't do any kind of marketing stuff besides this, what I'm doing right now. So go do that. You won't regret it. Now, for those of you watching live, remember you can actually put in questions on the chat, and I'll ask Claes those questions as we jump into the interview. So without further ado, let's get Claes in. Welcome, Claes. Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, let's see. You are in Denmark right now, right?
I am. I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark at the moment.
Oh, cool. So it's I think it's like what, 4:30 in the afternoon over there?
It is indeed. It is indeed. So late in the day.
Late in the day. You're finishing. We're starting here. We're
Exactly.
in Southern California, so we're just starting it out. So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into tech? You work for Deloitte as well, right? So how did you get into Deloitte and that stuff?
Yeah. So my background is I have spent the last 19 years, I think it is, about that time in tech and digital. And I started out in 2003, 4-ish as a developer, hands-on, doing at that time a lot of .NET, Sitecore-based development. Actually, we did a lot of large portal websites and so on. Always about getting it to perform, scale, and so on. Then I moved into more of you can say, a technical project manager role, solution architect, and then e-commerce came along and penetrated the Danish market, at least here in the Nordics, and then I went on to focusing on that. That also, of course, acquired a lot of, you can say, scalable ideas in terms of making a commerce solution run and performing with Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays and all that kind of stuff, very much in the B2C space in retail and so on. So I did that for up until 2021, and then I moved into Deloitte, where I started here as a lead on you can say same thing, but a shift from very B2C focused into more B2B focus, and also working with larger enterprises. I came from, you can say, mid-market and upper mid-market, and now moved into sort of enterprise market with all that entails in terms of pros and cons.
Yeah, definitely. Do you miss the days of development?
Yeah,
Do you
sometimes.
still develop at all? Or?
No, it's been some years since I've done that. I think I finally gave up on it in around 2016, 17. But I miss it sometimes because it's very tangible, right? If it works, it works.
Right.
So and now my job is more about the broad strokes and making things, making other people succeed, you can say, right?
Right.
Yeah,
definitely. Very cool. Well, and it's interesting. I mean, obviously, commerce is a big spot where you still have monoliths, but composability is being introduced everywhere now, right? I mean, everybody knows I'm part of Uniform. We're really big on composability, obviously. So we're going to get into that. But before we jump into that balance that we're going to talk about, the way I like to proceed with this interview is let's bring everybody up to speed on sort of the basics. So we can go through quickly. Some of you watching already know all this stuff, so you can go get your coffee right now. The rest of you, we're just going to bring everybody up to speed on the terminology, so we're all on the same page. Then we'll jump into talking about monoliths. Then we'll talk a little bit about composability, and then we'll talk about the balance between them. So let's start with composability. Let's define that.
Yeah, okay. So let's do that. I think that composability of and how it's been talked about, these days is very much about the front end, I think. I find that composability is both that, but it's also about, starting with the customer experience and then composing, you can say, that experience in the different touch points based on the different capabilities that is needed to achieve that experience. So I have essentially always worked a little bit composable. I've never started with, the box, the monolith, and say, okay, it can do this. So what do you want to enable from that checklist? It's always been about what is the customer first, what's the experience, and then basically building it out. So composable for me is about being able to compose that experience and being flexible about it, right? So that you bring the right capabilities to the right mix in terms of what that business needs to be able to service their customers in the best possible way throughout the end-to-end customer journey. That's how I see it.
So you think of composability from the user experience, which can include parts in the front end and parts in the back end. So composability is the entire stack, basically.
Exactly, and I think it's about making sure that we draw out the what is the customer experience going to be, and then we compose it by different capabilities, and then it's the ability to be able to connect that together, right? Which is a little bit of an opposition in terms of looking into a monolith, with more about this has these features. What do you want to enable? And then putting on a front end on top of that, right?
Well, it's interesting you say user experience too, because you're not even talking about a channel, because a user experience is across many channels, right? So when we're talking about composability, it's not just being composable for the web front end, but it's being composable for the entire user experience, the customer lifecycle, basically across all channels, right? Is that what you mean?
That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah.
And then there's just been a lack, in especially the front end, and especially the website, the web shop, or what you will, in terms of the monolith not being able to serve that to the best possible, in the best possible way. So I think that's and I think that's why it's very much focused, the topic and the conversation is very much focused on that, and for good reasons, I think.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned monolith. Let's define monolith for this conversation that we're having.
Yeah. So monolith, as I see it, is it's a one application with one data model with one code base, right? It can potentially serve different business areas. You could have customer service connected with sales and so on. That's one example. But it's about it's one stack, and it runs on one data model that is shared across it, right? So when you need to deploy, you need to take everything into account and not break the other areas of the solution and so on.
Right, and then we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of both, or challenges, right, of both. Yeah. About breaking. If you touch one thing, and everything can break potentially. Let's sort of go through these kind of quickly, but we have lots of terminology. The tech industry loves terminology, right?
Yeah.
So DXP DXC. Let's talk about the differences between them.
Yeah. So DXP, Digital Experience Platform. Basically, something like Sitecore is an example, Adobe is an example. It's a platform where you basically create the digital experience based on what that platform then has of capabilities, you can say. Whereas DXC is you can say digital experience composition, which is what I talked about before, basically composing the experience, starting from that point on, right, and being able to put that together with building blocks as you see fit instead of going, outside in what the digital experience platform has to offer.
Almost like Legos.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
except Legos coming from different companies, not just one company.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's jump into monoliths right now. Let's. I think we've got enough people that you were got your coffee. Come back, because now we're going to jump into this stuff. Let's talk about. The way I like to tackle these is I'd love to know the benefits and the challenges for monoliths, and then we'll jump into composable architecture. So, what are some of the benefits? If you can also sort of divide it into like benefits for developers, benefits for authors, and then benefits for enterprises in general, right? Like everybody else.
Yeah.
Because everybody thinks of, from their point of view, right? So I want to make sure we tackle those. So let's start with benefits for monoliths, and let's start with developers.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. So of course the benefit is for a developer is this one tech stack, right? So you have to learn one way of doing things, and you have one data model, so it's easy to, if you want to create something as a developer, it's easy to just access different parts of the data model and construct, your UI based on that. So that's the benefit, right? And if you want to move a little bit into one space, it's usually the same. And I say usually, but it's usually the same code that it works on and runs on, and that just makes it easy, right? So you can also, it's usually a large ecosystem as well, so you can build your career based on some of the large monoliths, right? So that is some of the benefits that I see from a developer point of view, right? It's controllable, and you know the deal once you get into it. You know how it works and so on, and there's no surprises usually, right?
So why don't we jump into the challenges for developers? Let's tackle it like that, so that way it's easier to keep track of. But
exactly,
so
and yeah, so some of the challenges is that, of course, it's usually built on some proprietary kind of code, and sometimes the roadmaps are slow, right? So you might sit working with your monolith, and then you look towards the new cool JavaScript that is being published, and you think, why can't I work with that? And so there's typically a disconnect between where the industry is at and where the monolith is at, right? They're trying to keep up, but it's hard, right? So you're not really working on the modern tech stack, and you say some of the other challenges is, of course, the deploy cycles and stuff like that. It's when you work with it and you want to extend it, you need to make sure that you don't break anything for the other developers that's sitting in maybe a completely different business area, right? So those deploy cycles, it becomes really hard to work with, and it is usually slow because you need to test everything, because if you have really large monoliths, a large parts of the corporation might be running on it, right? So if it breaks down, it's a giant problem. So the test scripts are slow, and the deployment cycles are slow, and so on, and that of course creates frustration if you just want to bring new experience fast into the hands of the customers.
So as an example, if you're working, let's say, on just the media management, and it's part of the digital, the DAM, right, in that monolith, even though you're just working on the media management side from a developer's point of view, you still have to test everything, because the code is so intertwined that you could potentially affect a billion other things. And we'll talk about Composable later, but that's what you mean, right?
Exactly. So I think that's some of the problems.
What about, because I could see, like you said, you have a code base, right, or a language that you work on that language and you're good, which was a positive thing. But also, I could see that as a challenge, meaning that, well, they only offer a JavaScript SDK, and I want to do it in Python or whatever, right? You can't pick the language, right? You can't pick that tech stack.
Exactly, and so that's inflexible, right? And it's not,
Right.
if you really want to work with that language and you're really accustomed to that, it's super restricted, right? You need to work with the way that this works, and usually I find that some of the monoliths has taken some choices which I don't understand in the past. Why would you create your own version of a language, right? Why not adapt to a Java or JavaScript or Python or .NET or whatever, right? But some of the more broadly used languages and build on that. I think that's a challenge sometimes, because then you as a developer, it's hard to jump out of that. If you work with that for 6 years, right, then that's your value, right? So So jumping out of that is a challenge, I would say, and yeah.
Yeah. I think the answer to that, this is my own personal opinion, but it's to lock you in the enterprise, right? You're
Yeah,
locked into that
of
monolith.
of course, but it's not good for the
It's
developer.
not good, right?
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump now to authors. Like, what are some of the challenges and some of the benefits of a monolith for authors?
Yeah, so if you're some a back office user or an author in a monolith, of course it's easy that you have everything in view, right? Because it's a joint data model, you have access to all the data that you need, right? So creating a report that has, another data point and another data point is easier, and usually. Also, these monoliths come with higher degrees of configuration and lower degrees of customization, which means that the bugs are if the partner that has deployed it is using standards and so on, then usually stuff doesn't break that often, right? Because it's configured and it works and it's easy to work with, and it, even though you move in business areas as a user, it's something that you would recognize and be able to easily adapt, right? So sort of that the same UI and so on and so forth. So
The
that
user experience for managing the content and everything else is very standardized across the board. So users know how,
exactly
or authors know how to jump in and out.
exactly
I would even add WYSIWYG, right? Monoliths have that pretty down because they focus mainly on web, right? So, and that's what I think a lot of authors always love about sort of the legacy / monoliths is sort of the WYSIWYG ability of editing what so they know exactly when they publish what it's going to look like for
yeah,
that one
exactly.
channel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges then?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges is that getting new stuff out. If you come up with an idea in order to perform your job even better, that you want to have this and that developed on the platform, sometimes you hit like a block, right? It cannot be done on this monolith. This is not
Mm-hmm.
possible, right? Or we need to do a lot of customization to do it. So it will take you the next half year, and you need to fit into the roadmap, and then maybe in Q4 next year you can get that piece of business development that you need, right? So you get into that churn of the long deploy cycles, and it's hard for you to sort of get those business development stuff out there, and also sometimes you're locked into whatever that platform has to offer, right? And sometimes they have prioritized different capabilities, right? So they're super mature maybe in sort of the CMS, but they're a little less mature in the DAM or whatever, or if it's customer service or whatever. And that just means that you might be looking at the market out here and saying, yeah, but all of the other CMS vendors has this, or DAM vendors has this.
Right.
Why don't I have it? Yeah, but that's because we bought it like across the board, right? We bought all of the capabilities. We bought for the whole enterprise. So, and your vote counted a little bit less, unfortunately, as opposed to the guys who bought the CMS part of it, right? And then you're stuck with what can I do? Not a lot. You can wait to Q4 to when the next release comes along, right? So
I think a
yeah.
perfect. Sorry. Finish your
No,
thought.
no, it's fine.
Yeah, I was going to bring up a perfect example of that is what's going on right now with artificial intelligence, right? And the ability to generate content and all this stuff. In a monolith, you're going to have to wait until they add it, right? You
Exactly.
can't just say, oh, just plug in, OpenAI's GPT-3 and then we can start generating content. You have to wait until the monolith adds it.
Exactly. But then, and there's of course differences in monoliths. Some of them are actually pretty good at being pluggable, right? And some of them have thought, the developer point of view in early on and are
Yeah.
easier to plug into and do customizations, but it differs. It still, needs to come into a deployment cycle and so on. And then there are some of them indeed where you can't do anything. You just
Right.
have to wait and hope that, the large customers that monolith has agrees with you to vote this up on the roadmap.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Yeah. So let's talk about the challenges and benefits for the enterprises in general, for companies picking this or having this.
Yeah, so you can say the benefits for having one vendor is of course one to negotiate with, right?
Or
So
to blame when it's down.
same thing, right? So if there's downtime, you know who to call, right?
Right.
Which we'll get to in a sec with composability, which is a different beast in that sense, right? So I think that's the benefit, right? And you can say you're also, because it's usually a lot percentage wise standard, then you can also easier switch partners, right? So it's easier to just say, yeah, I don't like Deloitte, I don't like Accenture, I can just switch, right? Because it's a basic installation slash with some
In
customization,
other
but
words,
it's
that
still
agency only needs to know XYZ technology. That's it.
ex,
Or
ex,
vendor. Yeah.
exactly. So it's easier to switch them out. So you have a little bit more power, I think, in the commercial side of it as an enterprise dealing with one vendor. At the same time, you're locked in, right? So you
Right.
can't just change, and they know that also. So that's the power dynamics in that negotiation, right? They also know that, yeah, but you're running on, if it's in the digital experience, you're running on our CMS, our DAM, our marketing automation, our CDP, and so on. So they are not going to just throw us away because it'll cost too much. So that's
Right.
our power into the negotiation, and then at the same time, the enterprise can of course, yeah, but we put all of our money at you guys, and so we need some discount because we're buying all these things. So I think
Right.
it's the pro and con, but it's you need to make it work in your favor, right? Of course,
I think
few
that's an
integrations, of course, also. So
yeah.
usually,
I thought you brought up an excellent point, which is these huge suites, right? That if you don't like one section of it, if you have the CRM with the CMS, everything is one thing. If you don't like the CRM, you can't just change the CRM to something else.
no.
And so that brings up also uh, training, I think. Would that be considered? How's training fall? Like training on how to use the system. Is that sort of a challenge or is it a benefit to Monolith?
I think there's some of the. I think it's a benefit. I think, in my opinion, I think there's many of the monoliths has created excellent training programs, right? Where it's super structured. It's what do you call it? It's almost entertaining, right? Uh,
Infotainment, yeah.
exactly. So it's structured really well, and you know that if you go down this route, you will get these abilities, and you go that route, you can get that ability and that certificate, and so on. So that is super structured, and then the ecosystem. It's easy for also both internal resource, but also consultants on to see the light and the idea that I can build a career on this ecosystem,
Sure.
as I mentioned before, right? So I think that works a little bit in favor of the
Monolith.
monoliths in understanding it simply, and you can go to Monolith University and get a degree, right?
Right. Yeah. I love that. All right, so let's we pretty much wrapped up the monolith side, but give us some examples of monoliths so people understand, oh, that's a monolith.
Yeah. So example is Salesforce is one, SAP is another, right? That's two large ones. You could also argue Adobe.
Like AEM.
However, exactly. But there's you can say some monoliths are, of course, also they have a large portion that is monolith, and then they have done acquisitions over time,
Mm-hmm.
which actually makes them a little bit composable, I would say, in the fact that it might be a different stack that actually runs their marketing automation than runs their their core part of it. So it differs a little bit, but that would be some of the examples that I would draw out and say that's a classic example of a monolith, right?
Yeah, cool. All right, let's jump into composable architectures. Let's talk about the benefits. Same thing, we'll do the same thing, benefits, challenges, and start with developers.
Yeah. So some of the benefits for and you could say drawback challenges for developers would be that of course it's super cool to you can work on whatever front end
Mm-hmm.
technology you like, right? You can basically work with whatever site generators you want to work with, and so on. So there's a huge range of you can say different things you can pick and choose from, and structure it in every way you want to. And also there's a huge flexibility because it essentially is custom coding, right? Essentially we're just taking, in the old days we did the same thing before CMSs, right? We had no CMS. We just did everything custom in the backend and then pushed out HTML. It's basically that custom backend is moving into the front end, right? And now it's I wouldn't say it's Klondike, but it's still very open space, and we can do almost everything we want, right? Choose the CDN you want, choose the language you want to write code in, choose you can say what capabilities you want to use in the back end, right? Which microservice do you want to use? Which personalization engine? Which CMS do you want to use, and so forth. So it's in the power is in the hands of the developer, but also with great power comes great responsibilities. I think Spider-Man said at some point, right? so I think that's also worth noticing that it's super flexible, right? And you can very quickly deploy new stuff. So deployment cycle can be super rapid, and you can really quickly deliver value to the end customer, right? And I think that is a great satisfaction when you're a developer, right? That you super quickly to deploy and run your test scripts and so on, and then you can see it working in the hands of the end consumer really quickly, and don't have to wait, for production deploy in 6 months or whatever.
But all this flexibility seems like it potentially could be a challenge as well, right?
Exactly. That's the flip
you're not
side,
forcing
right?
a specific framework, a specific way of writing something, a specific technology, which gives you all that flexibility. But at the same time, when you have other developers working on it, now they have to figure it out too.
I think you have to control yourself, right? And you have
Right.
to make sure that it doesn't become free for all, and everybody gets to choose what they want to do. And
Right.
you need to make sure that when you start out your project, that everybody agrees that we use Next, and we use JavaScript or whatever, right? This is how we do it, and this is our layers in our front-end architecture. This is how we build our integrations to the backends, and so on. So you have so essentially your what we need is that those really skilled backend architects that are out there that have been working in the backend for many years and are super good, that they basically move into the front end, right? And take, you can say, the front end architecture every bit as seriously as they've used to do in the backend, because it cannot be free for all. You need architects, right? It cannot be inexperienced JavaScript developer that just cracks on when you want to create something that is actually robust, right? So I think that's super important, and it's also important that that you make sure that some of the challenges is, of course, also that the DevOps landscape, you also need to control how you push it to your CDN and how you do all of these kind of things. How do you use your static site generator, and how does that work together, and so on. So that can become complex, right? So you need somebody to own that experience. You need somebody to own the solution, you can say. Whereas in a monolith, it's easier to say, yeah, but SAP owns the solution, so call them, right? That it's them that owns it, right? So where you really need to take, I think that's something I've thought a lot about. We really need to take the responsibility of having, and especially for enterprising, internally having the ownership of your solution, right? And knowing that, yeah, but we chose this because of that, and having the reasoning behind why you chose what you did, and the architecture, having an overview of that, so it's controllable. If you want to switch out capabilities over time, maybe you want a new CMS, it's super important that you then know, what did we implement on the old one, and why did we do that, and how does that work, and so on, because otherwise it'll explode in your hands.
I think that's worth repeating, that the role of an architect in a composable system is extremely important. Having frameworks in place, and I'm talking about development, technical frameworks, not like, a programming language, but having best practices in place, I think requires a lot more, because like you said, all of that you would end up getting from a monolith, which makes you get stuck with that monolith, right? But on a composable system, you have all that flexibility,
Yeah,
but you need to put some of that quote unquote monolith, discipline there.
exactly. And there's of course a reason why the monoliths have put that inside their systems, right? That is, of course, to control it, to make sure it's robust and uptime and so on, because they are measured on it also. So
Right.
some of those thoughts are not dumb, right? They are super good reflections that you need to make, and it just requires, that you need to have, need to be thoughtful when you plan out your implementation, right? So you need to have those conversations before you start, and make sure that you structure it in the right way, and better use a little bit more time on that than just going ahead and deploying a content asset on the side, right? So it needs to work across. So I think those architects will be super important, and it will be a benefit to us all if the backenders of the zeros and the tens open up their minds for Composable and move out there and take charge. I think that could be super.
Yeah, definitely. So let's jump into authors now. Benefits, challenges for authors.
Yeah. So of course, in a Composable setup, the challenges for the authors is of course to the fact that you have multiple backend systems, right? So if you want to do something with an image, you go into the DEM. If you want to do something with some content, you go into the CMS. If you want to do something with your prices, you go into your e-commerce, and so on. So you have many different, and depending on which companies you have chosen to deliver those capabilities, they might be very different experiences. And you need to understand that, okay, so if I publish my products here and the prices here, then it will connect out here in the front end, and you also lack a little bit of the what you see is what you get, as you mentioned before, Ryan. So how would it look? How would it actually appear? So and usually there's a lot of out of the box staging environments on a monolith, right, where you can just say preview and then you see how it looks, what it looks like. So you need to be a little bit more. You need to be good at having that complexity in your mind to understand that. Then of course you can create integrations across to bridge that a little bit, between the backend systems. But then you start to build your own monolith back there, right? So it's a balance, I would say. So I think that's the major concern. I think some of the losers, at least for now, in the Composable space is the authors, as I see it, in terms of the fact that I think they love their monoliths. If the monolith have the ability that they need, I think they love it because it's just out. It always works. You can preview, you can publish, you can do what you want, and it's so robust and proven. So I think that's some of the losers of the Composable that we need to make sure, or it's our responsibility to make sure that they don't lose this game, right?
Yeah. And so I think with Composability and Headless in general, right, the focus was on developers so much at the beginning, right? I mean, it's changing now. We're adjusting to authors, but the authors were sort of forgotten. Now, I don't like doing marketing whatsoever, but I do work for Uniform, and I think one of the challenges that you just brought up, and I'm just saying this because it's in the context of what we're talking about, not because I'm trying to push Uniform, but it does make sense here that some of those challenges can be solved with a platform like Uniform or any other platform that may be out there that does what Uniform does, but the ability not to have to jump out, the ability to be in one place and edit the DAM information, edit the right. So and that's where DXC comes in, right? Where we're starting to see a lot more.
It's beginning to move. It's beginning to move, and that's super good, I think. And
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm not. Trust me, I'm really not marketing Uniform, but I do work for them, so everybody knows that. But in this context, it makes sense to bring that up, and whoever else is working on that and doing that, I think that's where the market is ultimately heading, is allowing this composability of all these systems, but unifying sort of that front end for authors.
Exactly.
So let's talk about challenges and benefits for the enterprise of composable systems.
Yeah, so you can say that of course the benefits is fast time to market, right? It's easy to build out something and deploy it. It's also easy to change it over time. You're not locked into one vendor, right? It's easy to switch. It's easy to say, okay, so this new cool thing came out on the personalization, right? Have you seen that? Yeah, let's switch to that one. It's easier. You still need to rewire it, but it's still only a part of your architecture you need to rewire, right? And it has nothing to do with the rest. So it becomes easier to follow that, innovation with the market, right? Over time, and plug things in and out. It's not It's not like just click next, but it's still much easier than you have in a full monolith setup, right? So I think that's some of the benefits for enterprises to turn towards, right? So making sure that you actively all the time comply with what your customers want and need, because what we see the innovation gap sometimes is that you're behind the curve, right? So you know what you need, right? There's a lot of enterprises out there and companies who know we know what we're missing, but we cannot change that whole stack, and we need to do like a strategy, and then maybe next year we can do the RFP, and then you can then you're behind the curve once more. So the ability to stay on the curve, the innovation curve, I think will be pivotal. You see how fast AI is evolving and so on. I think being able to adapt those things fast, I think will be important. And then if you flip to some of the challenges, is of course, as mentioned before, that you really need to take control of that solution, because it's, in essence, if you have a truly composable solution, it is a custom solution by far. So you need to have your architect team having the control of that, and you also, that's in the build phase and the innovation, but also on the run, you need to make sure who do you turn to if stuff breaks down, right? So you need to be very in control of your first level and third level support, second and third level support, and in your surveillance, right? So which part is it that is down, and what do we do about it, and who do we call? So that whole framework of operations becomes so much more important, right? Because it's now in the hands of you, and the vendors only sit behind a microservice in the corner, right?
Right. And when you call them, they'll go, well, it's not us, it's them, because you're using that library.
Everybody points to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. So that potentially could be a big challenge. And also even negotiating contracts, right? Could be another big challenge when you're, instead of negotiating with just, let's say, Adobe for AEM, now you're negotiating with 5 different companies to figure out. So
exactly. And I think that's, but that you and that's the same goes for the negotiation in the monolith world, right?
Because they have control of you.
Works works in your advantage, right? So it's also easier to change out, right? Because you have the power to say, yeah, but you're just serving me personalization, right?
And they know also that you can change, which also gives you power. And the other one, in the monolith, they have the power because they know, yes, you can change, but you're not going to, because your entire enterprise is running on our stuff.
Exactly. But the architect, again, becomes a central piece of that needs to be in many different dialogues, right? Because you also want him in that procurement process, because you want to make sure that maybe they have a capability that is sitting in the corner, but we leverage it a lot, and it's not that common, because if you look at personalization engine, it's roughly the same. However, maybe your personalization engine has this feature that we use a lot, so actually we are a little bit locked in. So having that oversight from the architect to tap into the procurement in the negotiation phase there, I think is also super important, right? So
yeah, 100%. So before we jump into the balance, I want to talk a little bit more on the versus now, like one versus the other. And it's not to say one is better than the other, although I have my own personal opinion. But there's a couple of things we didn't touch upon, which is like the time it takes to deploy one over the other. And of course, it depends on the architecture and everything, but approximately are we talking about a 2-to-1 difference? I mean, like when we're talking about deploying a monolith versus deploying a composable system, what are we talking about time-wise?
I think it's, I have to give a little bit of a consulting answer, right? It depends, but because it depends on how large your footprint is. So I see, some monolith, the initial deployments and the initial go live is actually super efficient, right? It's maybe you build in 2-3 months, and then you go live in 14 days and something like that, and then you do sprints. But then as you enable the different capabilities in that monolith and the different business tracks, then it explodes on you, right? Because then it becomes very massive, and then it is about having quarterly deployments, and sometimes only 3 times a year, and stuff like that, then we're in that kind of space once you're into that. Whereas on the composable side, you can do it like,
sprints, weekly or bi-weekly sprints.
Weekly sprints, you could do daily, you could do like, instant deploys if you are in control, right? But I think you could do it very, on a daily basis. You could be able, if you set up your unit test correctly and so on, and you make sure that runs, you could do it very fast, right? Because you're not changing the data model in the different systems, you're just composing it. So the ability to deploy, of course, can be quite fast. But of course, there's also the bit about each of these microservices you have. They also have their own roadmap, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have Contentful and Context.dat and Commerce Tools, they are also evolving. So we are also putting our faith in the fact that they will be very diligent about making sure that their APIs doesn't break over time, right?
Right.
Because then because that will impact also how, if they constantly push changes to their APIs, that of course feeds into how fast we can then deploy our changes as well. So there's a dependency there, but to put it very simply, it's much faster in Composable than it is in Monolith. That's the fact. They are in each end of the scale, I would say, right?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I've been on both projects, both Monolith and Composable projects. And I just find it that in Monolith, there's a lot more pre-planning, design before you get to see anything. Where in a Composable project, you can do MVPs, you can deploy things much, much quicker and quickly fix issues. I just found that with Monolith it just takes a longer time before they get to see anything. And once that is out, now you're kind of a little bit behind the curve and outdated. So this is just from my personal experience in projects.
I agree. I think, and I think it depends on, because how business critical is your solution, right?
Right.
If it's just a content side, you can just do the deploy, and if something breaks, who cares?
Right.
A little bit, right? You just fix it. But if it's a business critical side, like high performing e-commerce solutions, you want to be very diligent about your unit testing and your deployment scripts and so on. So that also adds on top of your time to market, if you will. But it's nowhere near. It's in the different ends of the scale. So I agree with you there, right?
Yeah.
But it depends on how much business criticality you have. I think is that important.
So on the next versus thing is keeping the platforms up to date, and it seems that monoliths sort of are. So what I mean by keeping up to date is actually updating the system to whatever the latest version is. It seems like monoliths have a little bit of an edge, just because, not that they're kept up to date on the latest and greatest, but it's easier to update than a composable system where you probably have 10 or 20 things that you need to continuously keep track of and update.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it requires a framework, right? That you impose on your custom solution. But that's again, based on how do you structure it from the beginning, and how do you make sure that each of the capabilities and maybe the integration, you have different layers of unit testing running, and also you can say integration testing, and you have some environments that you stage it across. To make sure that everything is in place, whereas you can say the monoliths, the updates that they do themselves, I would say that it's non-custom, but what comes in the box and is running, that's very controlled, right? And you almost never see downtime these days, so it just appears, right? You have a new feature, and they're really good at controlling the release notes a long time prior to the fact that they're upgrading. So if something is going to change, that 2 months in advance. So predictability, of course, is also high. So that works really well in the modern and leading monoliths of the world. I think so. So I agree.
Yeah, definitely.
It requires more thought and control.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And Claes, by the way, we're pretty much almost out of time, so I'm going to close up this section here with a couple more questions. And are you willing to do a part 2?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
And we'll close up. Part 2 will be the balance, the actual balance.
Exactly.
How do we Yeah, we're
Exactly.
gonna jump into that on part two. We're gonna, hold a little carrot out for people to come back.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
but we needed to have this whole conversation before we can even jump there, because
Yeah, yeah.
if you don't have this understanding, it's kind of hard to understand how to balance everything. I
Agree.
do want to talk about the size of the team on the verses, right? Which like does one is there one require a larger team size than another, or are pretty even?
That is a very hard question, I think, because I would say you can do a lot very fast on a monolith, and the same thing goes on a composable setup. It's very much, I think, what augments a team and what makes these projects large at least also in the monolith space, is usually the wanting to control risk, right? And that requires a lot of control factors and a lot of reporting and a lot of these kind of things. Whereas if it was kept more pragmatic, I also see monolith deployments really fast, where they're super pragmatic about it. Just let's deploy and see if it works, basically, right? And it
Right.
usually does. So I think that's a factor. But then on the other hand, of course, you can say setting up deployment scripts and so on, and making it work really fast. I think if I am to generalize, I think you could do a lot of stuff with a smaller team in the composable space than that you would need in the monolith space. But it all comes down to what's the scope of the task, first of all,
Right.
but then also how much control and reporting and change management and all these kind of things do you need to have around it, right? I
Hmm.
think that's one thing. But I would say generally a bit smaller on the composable, and a little bit larger on the monolith side. But I think it also goes to the nature of who picks those systems. There's a
Right.
huge difference between somebody doing a startup and creating a website with Contentful, and one developer, and a Fortune 500 company that wants to deploy a website, right? It's two
Yeah.
different things, and therefore the team sizes also differ, right?
Hmm. Yeah. No, I 100% agree. And it almost sounds like it's a pretty equal balance, plus or minus a little bit, but on both ends, it sounds like, look, you're going to need people to do this right either way. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And then I think maybe if you look at who do you need, then I think you probably need
that's where
more
the difference is. Yeah.
business configuration people on the monolith, right?
Right.
That might not be they're more they can configure and understand business requirements, these kind of things. And you only need a few developers, where I think you need
The
more
opposite.
developers in the
Yeah.
composable space,
And
that
architects. Yeah.
and architects, exactly, to do
Hmm.
it. So that's the bit of the balance, you can say, in
Yeah.
terms of what types of resources, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So let's close out this section, and then we're gonna end the podcast, and we're gonna make people wait for the other part for later.
Yeah.
But so I'll give you its cost, and I'll give you an example. I cut my cable because the cable, a TV I'm talking about, cable TV was a monolith, and I said I'm gonna go to streaming, right? Composable. I'm gonna compose exactly what I want to watch because it's gonna be cheaper. Now I look at my bill and I have like four different streaming services, right? And I
Yep.
add it all up and I'm like, it's either about the same or more. So let's talk about monolith versus composability. Is it similar? I mean, obviously is playing around there, but is it something similar? Where are we at cost between them?
I think it is easier if you have a good technical team that controls your architecture, right? I think it is easier to find for some capabilities, use some entry level stuff, right? So maybe you're an enterprise, right? So maybe you don't need the full fledged marketing automation tool from the beginning. So maybe you want to test some stuff out to figure out what does marketing automation mean to you, and does it work? So you start out with something very entry level, but you go full on enterprise on your CMS system, right? Maybe. So I think it requires some thought, but I think the
Mm,
price you could compose if you don't dive into all the streaming services at once. Like you could compose a
right.
cheaper experience, right? Based on on what it is you need, but you need to think your roadmap through and think, where do I want to prioritize now? Because otherwise you can easily end up just buying very expensive stuff also from the composable shelf. But I think there's a tendency that, that the composable sides are a little bit cheaper, I would say. Also because they are new to the market. That's one thing, but they are also aware of the fact that they operate in a world where they can easily be replaced.
Right.
So they cannot afford to just up the price point. Then you just pick something else, right? So there's a little bit of power dynamics there, I think, is the essence of it. But with that said, you can still, empty your wallet on composable cool services, right? If you don't take care. I think what will happen is that probably the price points of the Monolith will come a little bit down once the other ones start to take over some of the market shares, and they will need to compete on those prices, and they will also need to become more. Some of them are a lot, very accessible via APIs and so on, but they will have to become more composable in essence, right? Because if they want to be a part of this, and that's about balancing, like we will get to next time, but combining them which is my that's what I see as a great potential in combining the two. I think they would need to adapt, and we are already seeing that. I think there are a lot of every composable, then all of the major vendors started saying, hey, we also headless and composable, right? Look, we also have an API,
right?
Please use that. So I think, and they will have to become even more of that, and I think they will also have to become a little bit more aggressive on price once the really big companies start to use the composable or move into the composable space. I think that's
No, so I think the closing thought here is that, look, you're probably going to end up spending pretty similar, but the difference is, and this is a great point that you brought up, is that with the Monolith, you're paying everything up front and you're getting everything, or you're getting nothing. With the composable, you are slowly ramping up, paying what you need, and at the same time, when I don't want Disney Plus anymore, I can cancel Disney Plus for my streaming, and now my cost goes down. That's composability. And so that does give the enterprise more power on a cost perspective, even though ultimately if you get it all, you may end up paying the same. You can downgrade, remove, replug in something else and adjust all those. Of course, the positives of the cost of one vendor is you get one invoice and it's easier to track, where the cost of 15 vendors, now you have to track, and tomorrow we want to add this, and then you add it, and now you don't even know how much you're paying for your entire system, right?
Exactly, and it's super hard to some are consumption based, and some are monthly, and some are, so it's
licensing,
super hard to,
right?
I'm not sure that the procurement officer will like this.
They're not happy with composability.
No.
Yeah, that's true. Claes, it's been a pleasure, man. I've enjoyed this conversation. It was great, and I'm so happy that you're going to be back. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. Likewise. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Now, if people want to get hold of you, that email right there is the best?
It is, indeed.
Okay, great. Well, Claes, thank you so much. I know it's the end of the day there. Probably maybe go have a beer or eat something. I almost time for that.
At least, yeah.
There you go. All right, Claes, you have a great one. Thank you for being on the podcast today.
You too. See you.
And thanks to the rest of you. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed this conversation quite a bit. And as always, if you want to get a hold of me, right there, Marcelo@headlesscreator.com, and come back for part 2, where we're going to have Claes back, and we're going to finish up this entire conversation on actually not the verses, but the balance between both of them, because that's real. That's more real life, right? It's not all black and white. We got a lot of grays in between that we have to deal with. So come back for that. So we will see you on the next one. Cheers, everybody.